Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and it's good to see you here today. So in recent weeks, we've been discussing the Platform Sutra, the lifetimes and teachings of Wei Neng, an 8th century Chinese teacher of Chan or Zen. And last week, he started talking about the meaning of Mahā, prajñā, pāramitā, and spent a lot of time discussing the meaning of Mahā, greatness or vastness. And following this, he is going to help us understand the meaning of prajñā pāramitā. So I'll just read the section. It's not terribly long. And then we'll go back through it and I'll try to throw out some ideas to initiate some discussion about Wei Neng's thoughts. What does prajñā mean? Prajñā means wisdom. At all times, to keep your thoughts free of ignorance and always to practice wisdom. This is what we mean by the practice of prajñā. One thought of ignorance and prajñā stops. One thought of wisdom and prajñā reappears. A person whose mind is full of ignorance says, "I'm practicing prajñā." A person whose mind is full of ignorance says this, but prajñā has no form. It's the nature of wisdom. And what does pāramitā mean? Well, this is Sanskrit. In our language, we say, what leads to the other shore, which means what transcends birth and death. When we are attached to objects, we give rise to birth and death, like when waves form on the water. This is what we mean by this shore. When we are free of objects, there is no birth and death, like when a river flows on forever. So we say this leads to the other shore. That is what we mean by pāramitā. Deluded people chant this with their mouths. The wise practice it with their minds. If delusions are present when you chant, because delusions are present, it doesn't really exist. But if you practice when you chant, then prajñā really exists. Those who realize this teaching realize the teaching of prajñā and the practice of prajñā. Those who don't practice it are fools. But if they did practice it for even one moment, their dharma body would be the same as a Buddha's. Good friends, affliction is enlightenment. One moment, you're deluded and a fool. The next moment, you're awake and a Buddha. Good friends, Mahā prajñā pāramitā is the noblest, the highest, the ultimate. It isn't present, it isn't past, it isn't future. And yet, the Buddhas of the present, past, and future all come from it and use this great wisdom to reach the other shore and to break through the afflictions and passions of the 5 skandhas. As the noblest, the highest, and the ultimate, so should you praise this teaching of the supreme vehicle. Those who practice it are certain to become Buddhas, but it is neither present nor past nor future. It's the same as meditation and wisdom. and it isn't affected by any dharma. The Buddhas of the past, the present, and the future all come from it and thereby transform the three poisons into morality, meditation, and wisdom. Good friends, this Dharma teaching of mine produces 84,000 kinds of wisdom from one kind of prajñā. And how so? Because people have 84,000 passions. If they didn't have any passions, prajñā would be ever present and inseparable from their nature. Those who realize this teaching do so through no thought, no memory, and no attachment. Don't create a bunch of delusions. You yourself are the nature of suchness. View all dharmas with wisdom. Neither grasp nor reject them. This is the way to see your nature and become a Buddha. So Wei Neng is trying to elucidate the notion of prajñā, pāramitā. He says that there is a counterpoint between ignorance and prajñā, ignorance being essentially the opposite of prajñā. Now, prajñā, the Sanskrit word, comes from two roots, pra and ñā. And pra can mean either before or beyond, and ñā is knowledge. In fact, our word knowledge comes from that same Indo-European root, na. So you might say prajñā is before knowledge or beyond knowledge. Wei Neng says it has no form. So words can't completely describe it. They can only point to it. It's interesting that around the same time, or actually a little earlier, that these texts were being generated, the prajñā pāramitā suttas, the sutras, these texts that arose probably in the 1st century CE or before. Somewhat before that, Socrates was very interested in wisdom and tried to demonstrate wisdom and communicate wisdom by way of dialogue, questioning. So typically, his subject would have a concept such as justice that he thought he understood, and then Socrates would start querying him about his notion of justice. And with further and further querying, it becomes apparent that his subject really doesn't have a clear understanding of justice. Not that Socrates then would go on to say, well, this is what I think justice is. He would just demonstrate that justice, whatever it is perhaps something that is beyond words for full description. And wisdom, what we use the word wisdom, actually Wei Neng sort of makes a counterpoint between, or makes an opposition between wisdom and prajñā. But prajñā, deep wisdom, wisdom beyond wisdom, is like that, having no form, being something that is beyond description. with language. And part of that is that prajna is not a thing. It's not something that can be attained, something that can be grasped in a way. It's not a one-up. It is something that is actualized through our actions. Prajna depends on us to express prajna. Wei Neng goes on to talk about pāramitā. When we are attached to objects, we give rise to birth and death. Now, this attachment is a subtle concept, and again, I'll probably tie myself in knots here, but it has something to do with forming a subject and an object, making us into something separate, making I into something separate, which interacts with everything else, with the rest of the universe. And when we do that, it creates a situation of desire or rejection, wanting something that's out there or rejecting something that's out there. Being free of that notion of the here and there, and understanding that we are the here, that the there is here and we are there, is becoming unattached. And when Wei Neng talks about the meaning of pāramitā, getting to the other shore, this shore is where we are stuck on some notion or some notion of possession. And the other shore is where we become free of that. When we are free of objects, there is no birth and death. Birth of what and death of what? Birth of this notion of a separate, fixed self, which is in opposition to the universe rather than being part of the universe. Deluded people chant with their mouths. The wise practice it with their minds and their bodies, for that matter. So prajna is a practice. It's a way of seeing and being in the world. Not something that can be written out in an essay so that everyone can just read it and get it. Prajna depends on us to actualize prajna. Those who don't practice it, he says, are fools. But if they did practice it even for one moment, their dharma body would be the same as Buddha's. Good friends, affliction is enlightenment. Well, wait a minute. So oftentimes we have the notion of this prajna pāramitā, the notion of Buddhahood as being something kind of out of reach, far away, exotic, associated with a luminous halo. But Wei Neng is bringing this down to everyday experience and saying If we practice this for just one moment, we become like a Buddha. So in that sense, Buddhahood is something that everyone probably experiences throughout the day, off and on. And we also experience ignorance throughout the day, off and on. It comes and goes. Again, it's not something to be attained and kept. It's something to be practiced at all times. And in saying affliction is enlightenment, this is something that I don't know if Wei Neng came up with this, but it appears frequently in subsequent Zen teachings after the 8th century, and in particular, frequently in Dogen's teaching in the 13th century, that samsara and nirvana are the same, that there is no enlightenment, no awakening without affliction. In a sense, affliction is the doorway to awakening. It's the opportunity at each moment to wake up. And as we see that, as we wake up, as we become aware of the affliction, then we have the opportunity to be a Buddha. When we talked previously about, I think we've talked about the Heart Sutra a little bit, and we talked about the Bodhisattva vows, that delusions are numberless. I vow to end them. The notion that one can essentially become a Buddha and then there are no more afflictions is probably a fiction, at least for the vast majority of us. Afflictions continue to arise, they're numberless. But each one is a doorway to awakening. That is what Wei Neng is trying to reassure us about. Buddhas of past, present, and future all come from it, referring to prajñā. Now, taken sort of literally in some teachings, prajñā pāramitā is considered the mother of all Buddhas. And that is a teaching that Wei Neng is reflecting here. And sometimes this is represented artistically. This is a statue from Java, I think from maybe the 13th century or the 12th century. Very well-known work of art. And it depicts Prajnaparamita as a figure, as a human figure, as like a female goddess, the mother of all Buddhas. So in a way, Prajna is the mother of all Buddhas, and Buddhas are, in a way, the mother of all prajna, because prajna is not a thing. It's something that requires us to actualize, to exist. The Buddhas of the past, present, and future come from it and thereby transform the three poisons into morality, meditation, and wisdom. Transform greed, avarice, possessiveness, transform hatred, aversion, rejection, transform delusion or confusion, the conceit of I am. Transform those things into morality, meditation, and wisdom, a kind of alchemy of the mind, which Wei Neng is reassuring us is possible at all times. Good friends, this Dharma teaching of mine produces 84,000 kinds of wisdom from one kind of prajñā. So, if this prajñā is beyond words, why are there so many words about it? Why is there this overwhelming library of, it's many of the libraries were burned, and there was a much more literature than even we have access to today, and certainly many-fold more literature than is translated into any one language. So why is there all these words about something beyond words? Well, words have their value. They point to. They're like a map. And, if you're wanting to go to Paris, just having a map of France is not the same. But it does give you a notion of how to get there. And there are all kinds of words, all kinds of images, and all kinds of practices that serve that function. And at least my present understanding is that for some people, praying to Allah 5 times a day is a form of prajñā. And for some people, reciting psalms is a kind of prajñā. And for some people, sitting in meditation and studying the suttas is a kind of prajñā. And all of those can lead to the actualization of Buddhas. Prajñā pāramitā, the mother of all Buddhas. View all dharmas with wisdom, neither grasp nor reject them. This is the way to see your nature and become a Buddha. There was an article in the paper about these speed skaters who are going to, or speed skiers who are going to be competing in the Olympics. And they were talking about how the best skier doesn't always win the medal, because every time someone goes down the mountain, it's a little different. They talked about the conditions that can affect one's time, such as whether there's a cloud covering the sun and interfering with the skier's appreciation of subtleties in the ice or the snow that they're going to be turning around. And the wind. The wind can be favorable or unfavorable at any given time. And the character of the snow itself is different. Each skier who goes down the mountain through the course, which they've never seen before, encounters somewhat different conditions. Wind and light and snow, all of this make enough of a difference to determine who gets the medal. And as we go through the day, it's the same sort of thing. The conditions are constantly changing. So expression of prajñā is constantly changing. There's not just one template that can be applied day after day, because we're always dealing with something different, something new. So it's an active endeavor, this practice of prajñā. So I think I'll stop there, and I would be interested in your thoughts about what is this prajna they're talking about? What is the other shore? And what could it possibly mean that affliction is awakening? Thank you for listening today, and I appreciate your all being here. We'll go into breakout rooms, and I'll be back in a few moments.